911, what is the address of the emergency?
I'm on the road to Arapika from US 19, and there's a dead body on the side of the road. I was driving down the road, and I seen a body, and I turned around because sometimes deers look like bodies.
Right. Yes,
911, what is the address of the emergency?
I'm down by Old Dixie behind Seapine. I just killed someone.
How did that happen?
I just hit him.
Hit him with what?
My car.
What was his name?
I don't know his name. I don't know what's wrong with me, sir. What's wrong with me?
Yeah. The guy calling said he hit him on purpose. You hear that?
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
That's why he's on the Old Dixie. And he called saying he hit him.
You're directly across from him?
Yes,
are you
sir.
in the woods, or where are you?
I'm in the woods, but
You're in the woods?
I'm in a little bit of a clearing.
Hello?
Right here! I called him over.
What's that? I couldn't hear.
Something to get off my mind. How was your
not
day?
showing that
How was my day?
Yeah, was it good? But
My day was perfect, bro.
What would be your advice for
How's
my
that a
parents?
PH10 status check?
What do you mean?
PH10?
I want to ask you, see if I can call my mother, but I know how she gets.
I wouldn't call anybody right now. You honestly, bro, you don't really even have to call anybody because you're over 18.
I know that.
No, which I totally understand. Let's just wait for a little bit and wait for the detectives to get here, and then they can say, hey, you can call your mom, not call your mom, whatever.
I think I'm just not telling her about this because, but then she's worried.
He's sort of downplaying the whole situation. He's asking police, what do you think I can tell my mom? Again, sort of like he is friends with them and they're gonna help him sort of circumvent the whole situation here. He's minimizing because he's out of tune with what's actually going on, which is the key feature of psychopathy. They don't register empathy or emotions, and that coupled with a lack of moral compass allows them to not display remorse for what they did and kill and engage in violent acts.
We came here because we wanted to see if check you out, make sure you're okay. We wanted to see if you could answer a couple of questions. Would that be okay?
Of course.
Okay, let's go back over here and we'll have a little chat, okay?
Do you work, Justin?
Just got tired today, but yeah.
Okay. And were you en route to somewhere specific today?
No, sir.
You were just driving to drive?
After I left, I don't know, my thoughts, I just felt really angry.
It really seems like Pinnell experienced a narcissistic wound here. He lost his job, so it seems like he experiences anger from this, and he doesn't really know what to do with it. When a psychopath experiences a narcissistic wound, it essentially bounces off them, and they will put it towards someone else. Whereas more of a neurotypical person, when we experience a narcissistic wound, we feel it deep inside and it causes sadness, perhaps some anger, but it's often directed inward. Whereas a psychopath is going to direct it mostly outward on other people, and they're going to direct their anger to whoever's around them.
I just couldn't think of anything. It kept, it's like, I won't say I'm hearing voices, it just kept sounding like I should kill someone. Maybe it might make me feel better. Maybe it might make me happier. And so recently I've been driving around these roads I know that people occasionally walk on and looking for people I could hit while avoiding witnesses. I don't know why I want to do this. I also just wanted to calm down. I was just having some mental issues. I didn't end up going to work. Later throughout the day, I ended up getting a call from I believe my manager.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me to call my boss. I was having a bit of what feels like an anxiety attack to me sometimes. I would say anxiety attack. I just was feeling stressed. And then he told me to meet him in the office. Met him in the office. He told me I was fired and gave me my 2 checks from last week and whatever I worked for this week, which was, I believe, 9 hours. So I drove around, and then I decided to sit here for a bit, just eating. I wasn't really waiting for anyone. I was just eating because I was hungry. Yeah, where you see the car got into the accident, but it wasn't. Anyways, I was just parked here, just eating, watching some YouTube videos, and I decided to drive again, look for someone to hit. I ended up going down Arapica. That's when I saw the old guy with the cane, and then I made a U-turn. He was going into the grass. He was trying to avoid me because he saw me going for him, but I just went for him.
He says he feels stressed. He says that he's potentially experiencing an anxiety attack. It's another element where I think it's important for people to understand that a psychopath feels emotions. They just don't feel emotions the way that other people typically do. What I think it is that he's prone to boredom. What I think it is that he has a need for stimulation. And the feelings that he gets about taking someone's life, potentially making him happier.
Okay. So you were approaching him and he was approaching you. And you swerved over.
Yeah.
Hit him, and I can see it. He must have hit your passenger side. And did you at all hit your brakes, or you just kept going, or did you accelerate?
I was accelerating to hit him, and then when I hit him, I was trying to brake, but when I realized the brakes were broken, I just tried my best to try to find something I could crash into to try to stop the car.
Did you hear him say anything?
I only saw his reaction.
What was that?
You know, that moment?
What were your thoughts like when that were right at that moment? Do you remember?
I just smiled and laughed.
He enjoys the harm that he is inflicting, which is certainly an element of sadism. And I think he didn't recognize how much he was going to enjoy it, which is why he smiled and laughed, even though he could recognize that Pratt was dying. So there's certainly an element where even though he is not engaging in a prolonged sense of torture of Pratt, he would have if he could, but the pole prevented that prolonging.
How fast do you think you were going when you struck him?
Maybe 50, possibly even 70.
And you had mentioned that you had thoughts of doing this. You wanted to do this.
It's really just for curiosity.
Okay.
But I figured if it was curiosity, it would probably relieve the stress once I figured it out, how it would feel.
Is this the only way you imagined doing it, or had you imagined doing it in other methods? Like some other way?
I mean, I'm really fond with knives. I was thinking about slicing people up and cutting them open, dissecting them essentially.
Yeah.
But you've never done that before?
No.
He's not entirely sophisticated on how he's going to act out his fantasy. He talked about wanting to dissect people, his fascination with knives, but he didn't do that here. He used his car sort of like he's a little detached from the person. It's not up close and personal, and that's because I don't think he was ready yet. I think this was sort of his first go at killing somebody.
Okay, so our forensic techs are here. What we'll do is we'll step out real quick. We'll let them take some pictures of you. I'm gonna call my supervisor and update him on what's going on, and then we'll go from there, okay?
I don't mean to smile and laugh in this situation. I'm just trying to not think about it.
What when you were thinking about like maybe possibly hitting somebody, did you think at all to yourself thought process with that?
Finish them off.
Okay.
Like I said, I had an interest in wanting to dissect people. Well, let's just say I answered one question I was wanting to answer, which was, what it felt like to kill someone.
does it feel?
I mean, when I did it, I was laughing. I mean, I enjoyed it, but afterwards, after I calmed down a bit, I wouldn't say I felt regretful. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I was more ashamed that I broke the car the way I did than I killed the person. Like, I was shocked the fact that I was thinking about hitting bicyclists because the fact that I see them more often than walkers. But then I figured, oh no, then my car's going to get damaged and I can't really cover that up.
More damage with the bicycle, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I thought the bicycle was going to cause more damage than me hitting the person. And when I ended up hitting the individual, I didn't expect that kind of damage.
Is he placing more value on the car rather than on a human life? Yes, he is, but he's doing it for a very specific reason. He's doing it because both things are objects that can be disposed of. But the car is his object, one that he would choose not to dispose of if he didn't have to. He cares more about what's his and cares less about what isn't his. In either scenario, it's still just an object.
You ever like Googled it or watched videos on it to see what it's like or anything like that?
I just like looking at the dead bodies. I tend to get a little hungry when I see a dead body. Not that I want to eat it. I just never could explain that. I just see a dead body and I get hungry and that's it.
Hungry like?
Which oddly enough, I eat food and then feel like I want to hit something, want to kill something.
We see Pinnell talking to officers about how he gets hungry when he thinks about killing. He's describing this behavioral concept called conditioning. So when you're doing two different things at once, like two stimuli are paired together, then you get a conditioned response. So when he tells the officers that he sort of has this hunger and feels like he wants something to eat, it's probably because he usually does eat while he's watching these horrific videos and thinking about killing.
What do you think your mom and your dad are going to say when we talk to them? Or if we end up talking to them? Do you think, like, you're going to have to tell them, obviously, that you damaged your car. So, like, what do you think?
I hit the deer. Not. I wish that was the case. At least in this way, it's like, oh, that's no big deal. You hit a deer.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny how people brush a killing of an animal off more easily than they do of a human.
Right.
Unless you go to, like, something like, say, a PETA and you murder a cat in front of them, oh, then you're going to raise all kinds of hell. But aside from that, any normal person would easily shrug off an animal's death versus a human death, which ironically enough, humans are technically animals.
I think here he is being a little bit more theatrical. He's expanding on his fantasy, really, that he's had for this long time. And I think he's doing that because he wants to get that rise possibly out of officers, and also it gives him excitement himself. So you can hear at that point that he does not have any regard for human life. Pretty typical of Psychopath. And he wants to just compare brushing off a human life just as easily as he brushes off an animal life.
Have you ever told anybody about your thoughts with this kind of stuff, about wanting to kind of do this out of curiosity, hit somebody or use a knife or anything?
I did try to talk about it with some of my families, or yeah, not my families, my parents. I happen to have them, well, I have them all the time, but they're mainly directed towards, well, my bullies and my school, during my school years, specifically in middle school. That was the worst of it, at least. I'm grateful that it wasn't the worst.
Is there any questions you have of us, or anything that we didn't discuss with you about, today, or anything that you think is important for us to know or you want to talk about?
I mean, I was really nervous of talking with you guys about my school life because that typically is a bit of a sensitive area for me.
Sorry.
I mean, I have a lot of stories to share about it, but if it has to pertain to the crime, then I'd rather just do that.
It makes a lot of sense in a way that he would have a lot easier time talking about the murder because that is something that he wanted to do. That's a choice that he made. That's something that he laughed and thought was kind of fun. Whereas talking about even the grades he got in school was making him very angry and upset and dejected. And it doesn't make sense to a neurotypical person why that would happen, but to him, in the way that he's thinking about it, I think it made all the sense in the world.
Were you hitting this person to hurt them, or were you hitting them to kill them?
intention to kill me. I don't really want someone to suffer. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I had the choice of suffering before I die or just dying, I'd pick the dying route.
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather have you just probably even just slit my throat, because that would be the closest thing I think of torturing someone. I don't believe in the fact that of torturing the victim. If I killed him, at least this way he didn't die suffering. Because how I see it is, if I'm going to die, I'd rather have someone just outright kill me, not just make it suffering. I mean, it's one thing to struggle, in which case you're suffering, making yourself suffer, but different story if you're like, okay, I accept it, kill me now. I mean, of course, I'm not saying that justifies murder.
Because Pennell doesn't view torture psychologically. He views it as physical. He doesn't view the fact that when he's going 50 to 70 miles an hour, that Pratt sees his impending death. When he crashes through the windshield and Pennell can see his face and Pennell is laughing at him, he doesn't see that as torture because he doesn't view torture that way. For him, all of this stuff was just a quick end to Pratt. When the reality is that Pratt suffered a lot, and Pennell doesn't care.
Did he ever make any statements that he wanted to harm himself or others?
Never himself. He has said he would just be, he's curious, but never followed through or anything like that.
Curious about what?
Curious what it would be like to kill somebody.
He said that to you before?
Yeah, but he said it on and off throughout growing up. You know what I'm saying? And he's never...
That's kind of... Do you think that's kind of a bizarre
Well,
statement?
then, yeah. Recently I was like, well, should we look into getting you help or anything? When he was 13, because he threatened he said he felt like killing the whole entire family and just running away.
Was he interested in true crime stuff as well?
No, he doesn't really get into it with me or anything. He'll just talk about it or how they die and stuff like that. He doesn't process things normal.
Okay.
I don't, you know how you have compassion for other people or things. He doesn't have that.
Pennell's mother really highlights that this hasn't been just a recent problem. This wasn't necessarily a impulsive act on this day. This is a long-standing problem that Pennell's had since he was 13 years old or even before. And they were a problem back then and probably only got worse over time.
Justin Pennell was sentenced to life in prison without parole for intentionally running over a 75-year-old Vietnam War veteran. The victim, Michael Pratt, was walking along Arapika Road in January of 2020 when he was hit.
All right. So you have a coworker who didn't show up at work.
Yeah. And I was texting with Steve this whole time. The only thing that struck me weird is that he wasn't being more directive, just super duper calm.
Just emotional and hysterical. He just said, something bad happened this morning. And then he said that Manya broke her neck in the shower while he was changing Oliver, and he panicked. So he said he cut her up. He's on probation, so that's why he was scared. He said he put her in bags and put her in my garage and put a blanket over her. And he said, don't turn me in, and I can't go back to prison.
What we do know about Mr. Johnson is that, you know, at the age of 18, he was convicted of rape and served 10 years in prison for that. Knowing his history and then hearing this story in the context of a missing person situation is the fact that, you know, the story already doesn't really fit together, right? She broke her neck in the shower, like you would have a reaction to that. But then the response being like, oh, so I cut her up and put her in several different storage bins. It's just such a disconnect. But then when you add in the layer of like, this is somebody who has a history of disregard for somebody else's bodily autonomy, that's the piece that sort of, I think, is most relevant.
He gets distressed a little bit whenever he's picked up by the police to be interviewed. But until then, he's really not doing much about his wife missing. That leads into this idea that he has this mask, so to speak, of being one person, this caring, loving, doting husband and father. But in reality, there's a very different side to him underneath that mask.
Thanks for waiting.
How are you?
Good.
Obviously, we're here to try to help in locating your wife. We just want to gather as much information as we can. And she's never kind of gone off like this before, never gone to visit family before.
When Claudine texted me, that's when I got concerned.
Sure. What kind of things were you guys checking?
I just had, I don't know. I went to Nate's work.
He's trying to figure out how he wants to play this. He's neither paying attention to like what's going on around him, nor is he really paying attention to his kind of feelings and emotions, which we probably suspect that he probably doesn't have the ones that we might be expecting for somebody whose wife is missing. But it's more like he's trying to figure things out, and that's like occupying so much of his computing power that he's got to put the rest of the stuff just on autopilot.
Okay, who's Nate?
Oh, he's a friend of mine, but Manya doesn't like him. I started smoking a little bit when I was around him, and she was upset about that, and casually drinking, and the casino thing. We go to the casino sometimes together.
Okay.
So he's said some things about her in the past.
Okay.
So when I was getting like anxious, like where is she? She's missing. I went and confronted him.
And the first thing you did was drive up to see Nate.
That was like I was like thinking about who doesn't like Manya? Everybody loves Manya.
I went into his work and I said, Manya's missing. Do you know anything about it? And he just was like a blank stare, and he's like, no, why? Like, he doesn't really care.
The fact that he uses the phrase, he doesn't really care, is the almost dictionary irony, and that he probably has no connection to it. But, you know, he's, again, probably in his mind trying to implicate his friend and just sort of tossed off this phrase. But from what we know about what happened, it is incredibly poignant for him to use those words, because he's the one who doesn't seem to care.
We just want to find out what your thoughts are, where we maybe could start, all that kind of good stuff. When she went missing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, we had a birthday party last night with my family.
Your wife doesn't really love the gambling aspect. Does that irritate her when you go gamble and stuff?
No, she doesn't. She doesn't like it, and that's one of the reasons why why Nate and her don't get along.
Do you fib a little bit about what you're doing sometimes?
There's been a couple times where I've went that I didn't tell her.
It's kind of like he's decided, I'm gonna have this very sort of poster child perfect family life, but I still want to do what I want when I want to do it. And so I'm gonna sneak off and have that thrill seeking and that indulgence because, you know, that's what we know psychopaths crave. They want that stimulation, they want to have that gratification. So he's gonna do what he wants, but the way that he's sort of utilized his charisma, if you will, is to kind of have created these two separate lives that he gets to live kind of almost in parallel.
We believe that you are definitely involved in what happened to her. We believe that we've located her, okay? We have talked to Nate. We don't think that you meant for this to happen, Steve.
It doesn't matter anymore. None of them in prison for the rest of my life.
You guys arguing about Nate? About the casino?
No, it was, yeah, well, it was about Nate. Are we doing this? Is this happening?
Tell us what happened last night.
We've been fighting for a long time. And, I don't know, I love her and just, I don't know, I think I'm selfish. She's selfish. It's tit for tat. Keeping track of wrongs, and it just gets exhausting, and just letting the little things get to me and getting irritated, but I didn't plan it.
Even though he's the perpetrator, he actually seems like he's trying to elicit some sympathy. But it's interesting because here he is accused of murdering her, yet he's talking negatively about some of her characteristics that he perceives.
Tell us how it happened last night.
Well, she found a bottle of vodka after church, and she was just irate. I know my family was coming. She wasn't talking to me at all. She gets so cold, and it hurts. And she's a wonderful person, but she can really cut deep and is quick to call names.
When he says her words hurt and she's so cold, it really seems like a narcissistic injury. His fragile ego is getting impaled by these cold words that she's saying. And when Johnson is constantly talking about what she was doing to him, he's trying to portray this victim scenario, and he's trying to really curate what the detectives are thinking about him and saying, okay, this is a man who was at his wit's end because his wife was trying to be overly controlling of him.
She was gonna leave. She was gonna take Oliver with her. And I mean, she's threatened many times before, and you know, she's even said before, do you think you'll get any custody? Do you think I'll get full custody? And she, you know, just really, and she's right. I mean, she has the card. No, I'll never see him again, or her again. But I didn't problem solve. I was getting angry and wanted some control.
What had happened, Steve?
I'll come back to that. I should have panicked, but then I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life, even if I could have gotten away. This is it. What's County Jail gonna be like this time around?
He can't help but see things through the lens of his own interest, because I think he's trying to come across as sympathetic by kind of acknowledging like, oh, what have I done? But then it has that narcissistic overlay because it's told in that way of like, I lost this, as opposed to like, what have I done to her family? But he just can't help himself. He just can't get out of his own point of view.
So back to that. So she's trying to pack Oliver and get his shoes on, and it's heinous, it's despicable, it's gruesome, it's incomprehensible. It happened so fast. I just wanted to threaten her. I wanted to have a card on my sleeve too. So her family and job and a life and a house and fun cars and freedom. It's done. But to not focus on me. She's like, I should have done this a long time ago. I know the type of person you are.
Couldn't hardly insults left and right.
I went to the bedroom to grab the gun. She's not going to take my family away from me. And I wanted just to scare her and, or just, I don't know, feel powerful.
Difficult to tolerate.
And I was in the bathroom and she was in the other room, and as she walked by for the last time to get Oliver from his room, that's when I pulled the trigger.
Where did you shoot her?
On the head.
And what did you do?
I couldn't even believe it. And she just buckled. I hit the floor.
At what point did you bring her into the bathroom and cut her up?
Right away. Put her in the tub, yeah. The shower there.
What did you use to cut her up?
A circular saw. When the skill saw wasn't working, that's when I took a break and I took Oliver and was going to get a rotary saw.
What all did you buy at Menards?
And a rotary saw.
The separation between what he does and his actions after, especially when he is in Menards, that just sticks out to me the most. He doesn't look stressed. The level of callousness, the lack of responsibility or emotion that goes along with that is almost unfathomable.
I actually didn't know what to do, and then this is where I panicked, and I planned on trying to dispose of the body. Just, I mean, I've always been, you know, there's a good side of me and a bad side of me, and I just, okay, how can I get away with this now? I put everything in the garage initially. I knew eventually, even soon, you know, I'm going to get questioned with my history, and people are going to want to look around, and so I had to get them out of my house for at least, I don't know, at least a while.
So the only person I could think of, which now I was completely wrong, but he did the right thing, was Nate. It's a wonderful family. Please take care of Oliver. Please give him equal time between families. That was a really big point of contention with Maya. I took the two of us out of the picture. Just, there's nothing I can do to turn back the clock. Saying you're sorry it's just words.
He's talking at the end about, I'm sorry, just being words. But the way he has been talking throughout this entire interview seems like just words. It's not clear that there's remorse or true sorrow for what he has done. And there's no indication that Johnson has any amount of empathy for the pain that he has caused and will have caused his son as his son gets older and realizes what's happened, but also the pain that he's caused both families, whom he just described as wonderful.
For psychopaths, they exist in the world solely seeking out their own interests. And so as long as somebody is serving their interests, they'll get the benefit of being treated sort of externally the way the person in that role would be treated. And so, i.e. in this case, he treated her like his wife so long as she played the character of his wife in the way that he wanted and needed. But as soon as that stopped happening, the character, to which he has no emotional connection, now becomes expendable.
I think you had something to do with what happened tonight. I think that you killed your family. Where's this gun gonna be found? That's what you guys to find. I'm looking in the eyes of a stone cold killer. There's no remorse.
It begins with a sound no one remembers clearly anymore. Maybe the distant roll of the ocean against concrete. Maybe the low hum of traffic moving through the early hours of a Sydney morning. The kind of sound that fills the city before the sun rises and before anyone realizes something has already gone wrong. Because on a quiet street not far from Parramatta Road, a car sits where it shouldn't, angled just slightly toward the curb, engine cold, door unlocked, and inside it there is nothing. That explains why its owner never came back. This is how the cold case enters the city's bloodstream, not with sirens or screams, but with absence, with a space where a person should be. And the longer that space remains empty, the heavier it becomes. In 2001, Sydney is restless but confident, a city preparing itself for a new century, still glowing from the afterimage of the Olympics, convinced that the future is orderly and bright. Yet tucked into that optimism are streets where shadows stretch long at night, where strangers pass without names, where a single wrong decision can vanish into the noise. The missing person report comes in late, almost apologetically, filed by someone who insists this isn't normal, that she would have called, she would have come home, she never left things unfinished. Police write it down, check the boxes, ask the standard questions, but the answers don't land because there is no clear timeline, no obvious enemy, no sign of struggle dramatic enough to demand urgency. Just a woman, a car, and a night that swallowed both. The car becomes the first witness, silent and uncooperative. No smashed windows. No blood that anyone can point to with certainty. The keys are gone. The wallet is still there. Personal items untouched. As if the owner simply stepped out for a moment and planned to return. Investigators circle it, photograph it, bag what they can, but the city keeps moving around them, commuters stepping past yellow tape, glancing once then looking away. In the papers the next morning it's a brief item, a few lines, easy to miss, overshadowed by politics, by sport, by the weather. Another missing adult. Another mystery that doesn't shout. Days pass, then weeks, and the missing woman's face begins to appear on notice boards and lampposts, printed in black and white, smiling in a way that feels painfully out of date. Friends describe routines, habits, the places she liked to walk, the cafes she visited, the shortcuts she took home. Police retrace her last known movements, a timeline built from half-remembered conversations and receipts that mean nothing on their own. Somewhere between a late phone call and an ordinary drive home, the line breaks. That gap becomes the heart of the cold case. A narrow window where anything could have happened and nothing can be proven. The community feels it before it understands it. People start locking doors earlier. Parents ask their children to text when they arrive. Taxi drivers talk quietly among themselves. There is no official warning, no declared threat, but uncertainty spreads faster than facts. Every unexplained noise at night feels closer. Every unfamiliar face lingers a second too long. And still there is no body, no crime scene that demands justice in bold letters. Only the echo of a life paused mid-sentence. Investigators chase what they can. A witness who thinks they saw someone arguing near the car, then admits it might have been another night. A neighbor who heard a sound but can't place the time. CCTV footage that captures movement without meaning. Shapes crossing frames, headlights flaring white and then gone. Each lead promises clarity and delivers fog. Files thicken. Evidence lockers fill. The case number grows older, heavier, harder to lift. By the end of the first year, the language changes. Active investigation becomes review. Review becomes periodic check-in. Detectives rotate out, replaced by new faces who must learn the story from paper, from photographs, from notes scribbled by people who have already moved on. The city changes too. Buildings rise. Roads are rerouted. The exact spot where the car was found looks different now, smoother, brighter, less willing to remember. This is how a case goes cold, not with a single failure, but with 1,000 small shifts of attention. Years slide by. Technology advances. Databases expand. DNA techniques promise answers to questions no one could ask in 2001, but only if there is something left to test. The missing woman's name surfaces occasionally, in anniversary articles, in quiet appeals from family members who refuse to let silence win. Each time there is a flicker of hope, followed by the familiar disappointment. No arrest. No remains. No explanation that fits all the pieces without forcing them. Inside police archives, the file waits. It is heavy now, thick with documents that trace the outline of a mystery without filling it in. Notes about possible persons of interest who were never charged. Vehicles checked and cleared. Alibis that held just long enough to survive scrutiny. Somewhere in those pages are moments where a different question, a longer interview, a better angle might have changed everything. Or maybe not. That uncertainty gnaws at the people who touch the case and then have to let it go. The cold case becomes a kind of urban ghost story, told quietly, stripped of names, reduced to warnings. Don't stop there at night. Don't trust a stranger who offers help. Don't assume ordinary nights stay ordinary. It settles into the background hum of the city, present but rarely confronted, until time itself feels like an accomplice, erasing edges, softening urgency, teaching everyone how to live with unanswered questions. And then, far away from the original scene years later, on a road that has nothing to do with Parramatta Road or the place where the car once sat, red and blue lights cut through the dark behind a different vehicle. A routine traffic stop. An expired registration. A moment so ordinary it barely deserves memory. The driver pulls over. An officer approaches. Questions are asked. Documents are handed over. It is the kind of interaction that happens thousands of times a night, logged and forgotten, part of the city's mechanical rhythm. No one in that moment is thinking about 2001. No one is thinking about a missing woman or a cold case that has gathered dust for decades. But somewhere in a database a name pings. A detail doesn't align. A routine check brushes against something old and unresolved. The past, patient and unforgiving, shifts in its sleep. For now, though, none of that is visible. For now, the cold case remains exactly what it has been for years. A question without an answer. A space where certainty should be. A story that refuses to end. The city keeps breathing. The family keeps waiting. And the file, thick and silent, waits too, unaware that its stillness is about to be disturbed. Unaware that a night much later will reach back and touch the one that started it all, pulling at a thread that was never truly gone. The file doesn't move on its own. It takes a hand, a reason, a disturbance in the system. For years, the case sits where cold cases sit, in the quiet margins of the department, mentioned only when someone new asks why a box that thick still has no ending. Detectives come and go, and each one reads the same opening pages, the same photographs of a car under streetlights, the same typed summaries that circle the truth without ever landing on it. The woman's name becomes familiar in a way that feels intimate and distant at the same time, like a face you recognize from a dream you can't quite place. Everyone agrees something happened. No one can agree on what. In the early years, there is still energy. Tips come in after the first appeals. Some are hopeful, some cruel, some clearly wrong. A woman who looks like her is spotted at a bus terminal in another state. Someone claims to have heard a confession in a pub, then disappears when asked to repeat it formally. Each lead pulls the investigation in a different direction, stretching resources thin, forcing decisions about what to chase and what to let fall away. Every choice creates a future where a different choice might have mattered more. Investigators map her life carefully. Work colleagues describe her as reliable, cautious, not prone to sudden disappearances. Friends talk about plans she was making, things left undone. Family members insist on patterns, routines, the small rituals that anchor a person to their days. None of it explains the silence that followed that night. There are no financial anomalies, no dramatic withdrawals, no signs of preparation for a new life. If she left, she did it without leaving fingerprints on her own future. The theory of foul play hovers without ever settling. There are moments when it feels close enough to touch. A man questioned early on, someone who crossed her path casually, gives answers that are technically correct and emotionally empty. He is checked, rechecked, cleared, and then remembered with unease. Another person of interest emerges from a late-night sighting, then evaporates when timelines refuse to align. Each near miss adds weight to the case. A sense that the truth is always just one step ahead, watching from a distance. As months turn into years, the investigation changes shape. What was once about urgency becomes about preservation. Evidence is recatalogued, stored with more care than before, because time is no longer an ally. Witness memories soften then blur. Streets are renamed. Businesses close. The physical city moves on, but the case remains anchored to a version of Sydney that no longer exists. Investigators begin to work backward, trying to reconstruct a night that even the city itself has forgotten. The media interest fades, then flares briefly on anniversaries, then fades again. Each article uses the same phrases. Mysterious disappearance, no suspects charged, family still searching for answers. The words lose their edge through repetition, but the impact remains for those closest to it. For them, time doesn't heal. It stretches. It becomes a long corridor of waiting rooms and phone calls that never come. Inside the department, the case earns a label that sounds clinical and final. Cold case. It doesn't mean abandoned. It means stalled, suspended, waiting for something new. Sometimes that something is technology. Sometimes it's a confession. Sometimes it's an accident. Cold cases are solved not by persistence alone, but by collision, when the past collides with the present in an unexpected way. Years later, a review unit takes another look. Fresh eyes, they say, unburdened by old assumptions. They digitize what was once paper, run names through updated systems, cross-reference databases that didn't exist in 2001. Patterns emerge that couldn't be seen before, not because they weren't there, but because there was no way to connect them. Still, the connection stops short of certainty. Promising lines of inquiry dissolve under scrutiny. Hope rises, then settles back into something quieter. The woman's absence becomes a permanent feature of her family's lives. Birthdays pass without her. Holidays leave an empty chair. Every major moment is marked by the same unspoken question. Would this have been different if she were here? The cold case isn't just a file. It's a shadow that moves from room to room, year after year, refusing to fade. Meanwhile, the city produces new crimes, new urgencies. Resources are pulled elsewhere. Detectives who once knew every detail of the case retire or transfer. What remains is documentation. Thorough but lifeless, waiting for interpretation. The truth, if it exists in a single shape, is buried somewhere between those pages, obscured by time and human error. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, something changes. Not in the case itself, but in the world around it. Data systems grow more interconnected. Old records talk to new ones. Routine procedures gain an unexpected power. The idea that a simple interaction could unlock a decades-old mystery stops sounding romantic and starts sounding plausible. Still, no one is thinking about this cold case on the night it matters. The officer on patrol is focused on the present, on the rules of the road, on keeping the shift moving smoothly. The driver being pulled over is thinking about inconvenience, about getting home, about how quickly this can be over. It is an unremarkable moment, the kind that disappears as soon as it ends. But systems are always watching, comparing, remembering things people can't. Names are checked. Dates are matched. A small inconsistency appears, subtle enough to miss if you aren't trained to look for it. A record surfaces, old but intact, tied to a time when the city was younger, and a woman didn't come home. The past clears its throat. At this stage, it's nothing official. No alarms. No dramatic realization. Just a note, a pause, a second look. An officer flags something for follow-up, unaware of how heavy that small action will become. The cold case, dormant for so long, shifts again, as if responding to a call only it can hear. Back in the archives, the file is pulled from the shelf. Dust rises. Pages are turned. A name that once sat quietly on the periphery now feels louder, sharper. Investigators lean in, cautious, trained not to believe too quickly. Cold cases teach patience and they punish optimism. Still, there is a sense, faint but undeniable, that the distance between then and now is narrowing. Nothing is solved yet. No one is celebrating. But the silence that defined the case for so long has changed in texture. It no longer feels empty. It feels charged, like the air before a storm. Somewhere between a routine traffic stop and a decades-old disappearance, a line has been drawn, thin but real, connecting two nights that were never meant to meet. And as the city sleeps unaware, the cold case waits again. This time not in stillness, but in anticipation, poised on the edge of movement, ready to test whether time can truly keep a secret forever. The review doesn't happen in a rush. Cold cases never move fast, even when something finally stirs. Every step is measured, cautious, weighted by the memory of past false starts. Investigators know the danger of seeing patterns where none exist, of forcing meaning onto coincidence. So they slow it down. They take the name flagged during that traffic stop and place it gently beside the old file. Not inside it yet, just close enough to compare without commitment. At first, the overlap seems thin. A shared suburb. A timeline that almost fits. A vehicle registered years later that resembles one mentioned briefly in an early witness statement and then dismissed. Almost doesn't count in court. Almost is the language of cold cases that never close. But when they dig deeper, almost starts to stack. Employment records line up in a way they didn't before. Casual job here. A short-term contract there. Nothing criminal on its own. Just proximity. Just opportunity. The name has been in the system for decades, but never loud enough to attract attention. Minor offenses. Traffic infringements. The kind of administrative footprint that blends into the background noise of policing. In 2001, this person was barely a blip, questioned once in passing, not even formally interviewed. At the time, there was no reason to push harder. Too many possibilities. Too little evidence. The moment passed, filed away under not enough to proceed. Now, with years of data layered over years of absence, that same name feels heavier. Investigators pull old notes and see what they didn't see before. The wording of a statement. A hesitation marked by a detective who has long since retired. A detail about timing that didn't match then, but sits uncomfortably now. The cold case begins to rearrange itself, pieces sliding closer together without fully locking. They rebuild the timeline from scratch as if the last 2 decades never happened. The night of the disappearance is reconstructed minute by minute. Phone records. Traffic patterns. Weather reports. Everything that can anchor memory to fact is laid out across tables and screens. The city of 2001 reappears in fragments, and within it, 2 lives moving closer than anyone realized at the time. Witnesses who are still alive are contacted again. Some don't want to talk. Some barely remember. Some remember too much, their recollections warped by years of speculation and guilt. A neighbor insists now that the sound they heard was louder than they first said. A former colleague recalls an uneasy interaction that didn't seem important back then. Each interview adds texture but also distortion. Truth becomes something investigators have to excavate carefully, brushing away years of assumption. The suspect, if that word can be used yet, is approached indirectly. Background checks. Quiet surveillance. Nothing confrontational. The goal is information, not accusation. On paper, their life has been unremarkable, marked by movement, by instability, by relationships that start and end without much trace. There is no obvious violence, no clear escalation. This is what makes cold cases dangerous. The absence of spectacle can hide the presence of intent. Inside the department, tension builds quietly. Detectives trade careful looks, aware that they might finally be standing near the edge of something real. But experience has taught them restraint. For every cold case that breaks open, 10 more collapse under scrutiny. Hope is rationed. Excitement is kept out of official language. Everything is documented, justified, prepared to withstand the weight of challenge. They return to the physical evidence such as it is. Items collected from the car, stored for years, are tested again with methods that didn't exist before. Results come back slowly. Some confirm what was already known. Some reveal nothing at all. And then one detail refuses to be ignored. A trace so small it was meaningless in 2001, now illuminated by technology and patience. It doesn't tell the whole story, but it whispers part of it. Legal advisors are brought in early. This isn't just about solving a mystery anymore. It's about whether the truth, if uncovered, can survive the scrutiny of a courtroom after so much time has passed. Memories fade. Evidence degrades. Defense arguments sharpen. Every move from this point forward carries consequences not just for the case, but for the people bound to it. The family is informed cautiously. No promises. No declarations. Just the acknowledgement that the case is active again, that there may be developments. For them, the news lands with a complicated weight. Hope is dangerous after years of disappointment. Still, it creeps in uninvited, filling the spaces that grief has long occupied. They listen carefully, afraid to ask the question that has waited on their tongues for decades. The suspect is finally interviewed. Not arrested. Not charged. Just talked to. The room is quiet. The questions are simple at first, designed to establish comfort, to map reactions. The answers come smoothly, practiced, as if this conversation has been anticipated for years. But beneath the calm there are fractures. A date remembered incorrectly. A place described with too much detail. Small things, but cold cases are built on small things. Investigators compare notes afterward. They don't declare victory. They don't even say suspect out loud yet. They say person of interest, the safest phrase in the language. But something has shifted again. The distance between the disappearance and the present feels shorter now, compressed by focus and intent. Outside, the city continues its routines, unaware that an old story is being dragged slowly back into the light. People drive the same roads, stop at the same lights, live above the same buried histories. Somewhere, the woman's name is spoken aloud in offices and interview rooms again. No longer just ink on paper. The cold case is no longer asleep. It isn't solved. Not yet. But it's awake, alert, and moving forward inch by inch, testing every step, carrying the weight of years toward a moment that could finally demand an answer, or collapse once more into silence. Pressure doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. It settles into rooms, into conversations, into the spaces between questions and answers. By the time the investigation reaches its fourth turning point, everyone involved can feel it, even if no one says it out loud. The cold case has crossed an invisible line. It's no longer just a historical puzzle. It's a live wire, humming beneath every decision. Investigators begin to notice how often the same name resurfaces when they widen the frame just slightly. Not center stage, never obvious, but always close enough to matter. A shared acquaintance here. A workplace overlap there. A stretch of time unaccounted for that had once been dismissed as ordinary. In isolation, each detail is forgettable. Together, they start to form a silhouette, incomplete but unsettling. They revisit the early days of the investigation with a harsher lens. Old interviews are replayed not just for content but for tone. Where voices rise. Where they flatten. Where answers arrive too quickly. A statement given in 2001 suddenly sounds different when heard in 2020, stripped of its original context and placed beside what is now known. The words haven't changed. The meaning has. One particular witness, long considered marginal, moves closer to the center. Back then, their account was vague, hesitant, delivered under stress and quickly overshadowed by louder leads. Now, with timelines rebuilt and locations mapped precisely, that same account aligns too neatly to ignore. Investigators reach out again, aware that memory is fragile and easily contaminated, but also aware that some truths wait years for the right moment to surface. The conversation is difficult. Time has reshaped everything. The witness struggles, pauses often, fights the instinct to fill gaps with guesses. But amid the uncertainty, there are moments of clarity, sharp and unexpected. A car color, a voice, a phrase spoken in passing that lodged itself somewhere deep and refused to disappear. It's not enough to prove anything, but it's enough to disturb the calm. Attention turns back to the suspect's movements in the months following the disappearance. Patterns emerge that once looked like coincidence. A sudden change of address, a job abandoned without explanation, a brief period of instability that coincides with the tightening of the original investigation. At the time, no one connected it. Now, it feels like a response, not a coincidence, like someone adjusting to pressure before anyone realized pressure was there. Digital footprints fill in what memory can't. Old records surface from systems that barely existed in 2001. Phone data, fragmentary but telling. A call placed, then deleted from recollection. A device pinging a tower it shouldn't have just once, just long enough to register. The city's invisible infrastructure remembers what people forget. Inside the department, debate intensifies. Some argue the case is still too thin, too dependent on inference. Others point out that cold cases are never thick with certainty. They are built from accumulation, from the slow convergence of improbabilities. Supervisors listen, weigh risk against responsibility. The possibility of arrest looms, heavy with consequence. Get it wrong and the case could collapse forever. Wait too long and it could slip away again. Legal counsel pushes back, demanding rigor. What can be proven? What can be corroborated? What will survive cross-examination decades after the fact? Every new piece of information is stress-tested, challenged internally as if the defense is already in the room. This isn't just about identifying a suspect. It's about building a narrative that can stand when every assumption is attacked. The family remains at a distance, informed only in broad strokes. Investigators know better than to raise expectations prematurely. Still, the shift is impossible to hide entirely. The tone of updates changes. The pauses are shorter. The language is more deliberate. For the first time in years, the idea of resolution feels close enough to hurt. The suspect senses it too. Behavior changes, subtle but noticeable. A guardedness that wasn't there before. Questions about procedure. A sudden interest in what police can and can't do after so much time has passed. None of it is illegal. All of it is revealing. When confronted gently with inconsistencies, the responses remain calm, but the ease is gone, replaced by calculation. Investigators return to the car again, mentally if not physically. They imagine the night as it must have unfolded, not in cinematic flashes, but in mundane steps. A conversation, a decision, a moment where something ordinary tipped into something irreversible. The lack of violence at the scene now feels intentional, not accidental. A choice to avoid attention, a preference for control. As the pieces draw closer, a working theory takes shape, cautious and provisional. It doesn't answer every question. It doesn't need to. It explains enough to justify the next step. The theory is shared quietly, refined, challenged, rebuilt. By the time it's written down, it no longer looks like speculation. It looks like a path. Authorization is sought. Warrants are discussed. The threshold between interest and action approaches. Everyone involved understands what this means. Once crossed, there is no returning to the safety of ambiguity. The cold case will either break open or shatter under its own weight. Outside, life goes on indifferent. People walk past the places where history bent without knowing it. Cars move through intersections that once framed a disappearance. The city has no memory, but the investigation does, and that memory is sharpening, focusing, preparing for a moment that has been delayed for decades. The cold case, once defined by silence, now vibrates with possibility. The years of waiting, the false starts, the dead ends, all converge toward a narrow window where action becomes unavoidable. Whatever happens next will echo backward as much as forward, reaching into 2001 and pulling it, finally, into the present. The warrant changes everything, even before it's executed. It shifts the posture of the investigation from observation to intent, from waiting to acting. Papers are signed quietly. Dates are double-checked. Every line is read with the understanding that this document connects 2 decades of silence to a single moment of intrusion. When the authorization comes through, there is no celebration. Just a tightening of focus, a collective breath held a little longer than usual. They choose the timing carefully. Early morning, when routines are predictable and defenses are low. The address has been visited before, casually during background checks, but this time the approach is different. Marcavehículos. Radios kept low. Officers moving with the calm precision that comes from rehearsal and restraint. The goal is information, evidence, not spectacle. Cold cases don't benefit from noise. Inside the property, life looks ordinary. Furniture arranged without personality. Drawers filled with the expected clutter of years. Nothing that announces guilt or innocence at a glance. This is often the most unsettling part. The way potential violence hides behind normalcy. How decades can pass without leaving visible scars. Investigators move methodically, cataloging, photographing, bagging, resisting the urge to interpret too soon. They find items that raise eyebrows but don't yet close the circle. Old devices. Storage media that requires specialized recovery. Documents that place the suspect in locations they once claimed not to be. Each discovery is logged, sealed, removed from the space where it has sat undisturbed for years. The house grows quieter as evidence leaves it, as if pieces of its history are being peeled away. The suspect is cooperative, outwardly at least. Questions are answered with practiced neutrality. Rights are acknowledged. There is no outburst, no collapse. That comes later if it comes at all. For now, the interaction remains controlled, almost polite. But beneath the surface, tension thickens. The cold case has stepped out of abstraction and into a living room. Back at headquarters, the evidence begins its slow transformation from object to implication. Digital forensic teams work carefully, aware that age makes everything fragile. Data recovered from obsolete formats emerges in fragments, incomplete but suggestive. Timestamps, file remnants, traces of activity clustered around dates that matter. None of it is definitive alone. Together, it starts to sketch a pattern that didn't exist before. Interviews resume sharper now, more direct. The suspect is confronted with discrepancies, not aggressively, but persistently. Each answer is measured against what investigators already know. Silence becomes as important as speech. Pause where there shouldn't be one. A clarification offered too quickly. These are not proof. They are pressure points. The family is updated again, this time with more gravity. Words are chosen with care, but the shift is unmistakable. There is movement. There is cause. For them, the news lands like a wave that is both relief and terror. Hope, long suppressed, pushes back to the surface, bringing with it the fear of disappointment. They brace themselves because they have learned what this process can take. As days pass, the investigation narrows. Secondary warrants follow. Locations once thought irrelevant are revisited with new purpose. A stretch of land searched and dismissed years ago is examined again with different tools, different assumptions. The absence of remains remains a problem, a void at the center of the case that refuses to be filled. But absence itself can become evidence when framed correctly. Prosecutors review the growing file with cautious interest. Questions are asked. Challenges raised. What can be proven beyond reasonable doubt? What relies too heavily on inference? The standard is high, unforgiving. Cold cases don't get sympathy from juries just because they're old. They demand clarity, coherence, and restraint. Inside the investigative team, fatigue mixes with resolve. Everyone is aware of the stakes, of the years invested, of the eyes now quietly watching. Media hasn't caught on yet, but it will. When it does, the narrative will harden quickly, and there will be no room for error. Every decision made now will be examined later under harsh light. The suspect's demeanor shifts again. Less cooperative. More guarded. Legal representation appears. Communication becomes formal. The easy flow of conversation dries up, replaced by carefully constructed statements. It's a familiar progression, one that suggests awareness, not necessarily guilt, but awareness that the ground has changed. At night, investigators revisit the timeline in their minds, replaying it until it feels almost lived. They imagine the ordinary beginning of the night in 2001, the unremarkable choices that led to an irreversible outcome. They imagine the years that followed, the adjustments, the careful navigation of a life lived beside a secret, if that is indeed what this is. The human mind reaches for understanding even as it prepares for judgment. The cold case, once defined by distance, now feels close enough to touch. Not solved. Not yet. But shaped, constrained, guided toward a resolution that no longer feels hypothetical. The question is no longer whether something happened, but whether what happened can finally be named, proven, and held in place long enough to matter. As evidence accumulates and options narrow, one truth becomes unavoidable. Whatever the final outcome, the silence that protected this mystery for so long has been broken. The past has been disturbed, and it will not settle back into sleep. The city may not notice yet, but a story it thought was finished has begun to speak again, louder this time, demanding to be heard. Momentum is a fragile thing. In cold cases, it can vanish as quickly as it appears, dissolved by a single failed test or a legal obstacle no one anticipated. So when Part 6 begins, the investigation doesn't surge forward. It tightens. Every assumption is questioned again, every conclusion forced to justify its existence. The closer they get to an arrest, the more careful they become, because this is the point where mistakes are fatal. Forensic results arrive in stages, never all at once, each report carrying the weight of expectation. Some confirm what investigators feared. Others complicate the picture, introducing ambiguity where clarity was hoped for. A trace that suggests presence but not action. A timestamp that narrows a window without closing it. The science is precise, but the story remains stubbornly human, messy, resistant to clean lines. Prosecutors begin to speak more often with detectives now, not just reviewing files but shaping them. They ask for timelines that can be explained to 12 strangers with no emotional investment in 2001. They ask which witnesses will still hold under cross-examination, which memories are too fragile to lean on. The question is no longer what happened but what can be proven happened, and those are not always the same thing. The suspect, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation, retreats into formality. Every interaction is filtered through legal counsel. Statements are short, precise, drained of anything resembling spontaneity. Where there was once guarded cooperation, there is now controlled distance. It's a familiar shift, one investigators have seen before, and it confirms what they already suspect. This person understands the danger they are in. Behind the scenes, detectives revisit the earliest decision points in the case, moments where different paths might have led here sooner. They are not looking to assign blame. They are looking for vulnerabilities, places where the defense might argue contamination, tunnel vision, or hindsight bias. Cold cases don't just fight time. They fight the narrative that they were mishandled from the start. Media interest flickers to life as rumors circulate. A journalist makes a call. A name is almost printed, then pulled at the last moment. The department issues no statements. Silence becomes strategy. Once the story breaks, it will break hard, and there will be no controlling its shape. Until then, they work in the narrow space between secrecy and inevitability. The family is brought in again, this time face to face. No euphemisms. No softening. They are told the case is approaching a critical stage, that an arrest is possible, not guaranteed but possible. The room fills with emotion that has been stored for decades, grief layered with anticipation, anger braided with exhaustion. They listen carefully, ask few questions, afraid that speaking hope out loud might cause it to retreat. Search efforts intensify in targeted areas identified through the evolving theory of the case. These are not broad sweeps anymore. They are precise, informed by years of accumulated inference. Ground is examined where it was once ignored. Waterways considered again under different assumptions. The absence of remains continues to haunt the investigation, but it no longer paralyzes it. Investigators adjust, building a case that doesn't depend on a body to speak. Internally, debates sharpen. Some believe the threshold for arrest has been reached. Others urge patience, arguing that one more piece could mean the difference between a charge and an acquittal. The pressure is constant, coming from above, from the public, from the weight of the case itself. Everyone understands what's at stake. This isn't just about closure. It's about credibility. Late nights become routine. Offices glow long after the city outside goes dark. Detectives read and reread transcripts, searching for inconsistencies they might have missed. They rehearse explanations, anticipate questions, prepare for scenarios that branch endlessly in their minds. Cold cases don't end cleanly. They unravel slowly, and the unraveling demands endurance. Then comes the moment when delay becomes risk. A realization that waiting longer could allow evidence to be challenged, memories to degrade further, opportunities to slip away. The balance tips subtly but decisively. Senior investigators meet, weigh the options one last time, and reach a conclusion that has been approaching for weeks. The paperwork begins. Arrest protocols are reviewed. Teams are briefed with deliberate calm. There is no sense of triumph, only gravity. An arrest, if it comes, will not answer every question. It will not restore what was lost. It will simply move the cold case into its next phase, where truth is argued rather than investigated. As plans solidify, the suspect continues their daily routines, unaware of the exact timing, but clearly sensing the narrowing circle. Life goes on around them, ordinary and indifferent. That contrast between the enormity of what is coming and the banality of the present sharpens the tension more than any dramatic gesture could. The city, still largely unaware, moves through another night. Cars stop at lights. Streets empty and refill. Somewhere within this familiar rhythm, a decades-old silence is about to be formally broken, not by revelation, but by procedure, by a knock on a door that will finally connect the past to the present in a way that can't be undone. The cold case stands at the edge of transformation. No longer just a mystery, not yet a verdict. Balance between what is known and what can be proven. And as the moment approaches, everyone involved understands the same thing. Once this line is crossed, the story will belong not just to investigators and families, but to the public record, where it will be tested, challenged, and remembered in ways no one can fully control. The arrest does not come with drama. There are no flashing cameras, no shouted commands echoing down the street. It happens the way cold cases always do in the end, quietly, deliberately, with a weight that settles only after the moment has passed. A knock at the door. Name stated. Procedure followed. Years of speculation collapse into a few controlled sentences spoken in calm, professional tones. The suspect listens without visible shock. That, in itself, is noted. Hands are placed where they're told. Cuffs close with a soft, final sound. Neighbors glance through curtains, sensing importance without understanding it. To them, it's just another police visit. Another disruption in an ordinary street. They don't know they're watching the present collide with 2001. At headquarters, the booking process unfolds with ritual precision. Fingerprints taken. Photographs updated. The system accepts the name not as a footnote anymore, but as a central figure. Cold case detectives watch from a distance, restrained, aware that this is not the end but a transition. An arrest is not truth. It's a claim that must now survive confrontation. Interrogation is different this time. The rules are clear. The stakes are understood by everyone in the room. Questions are fewer, sharper, anchored to evidence that has been carefully withheld until now. When contradictions are presented, they are delivered calmly, without accusation, like weights placed gently but firmly on the table. The suspect's composure holds at first. Denials are precise. Language is cautious. But the rhythm is off. Answers lag where they shouldn't. Certain details are avoided entirely. When confronted with data that places them closer to the disappearance than they ever admitted, the silence stretches longer than before. It's not a confession. Doesn't need to be. It's a crack. Outside the room, prosecutors observe, already thinking ahead to courtrooms and juries, to arguments that will dissect every word spoken here. They know this interview may never be played in full. What matters is how it shapes the next steps, how it sharpens the theory that will soon be tested publicly. The family is notified within hours. This time, the words are unmistakable. An arrest has been made. The reaction is not celebration. It's a complicated release, tears mixed with disbelief, Relief tangled with the fear of what comes next. For years they imagined this call. Now that it's here, it feels unreal, like a moment borrowed from someone else's life. News breaks quickly. Headlines spread across screens and front pages, echoing language once used only in whispers. Cold case solved. Arrest shocks community. The city reacts with a mixture of surprise and grim recognition. People remember where they were in 2001. They remember seeing the missing posters, reading the short articles, assuming it would all be explained someday. Public scrutiny arrives immediately. Commentators question why it took so long. Armchair analysts revisit old theories, accuse, speculate, reconstruct. The investigation team braces for it, knowing that every decision they made will now be judged with the clarity of hindsight. This is the price of reopening the past. Legal motions follow fast. Bail is contested. Arguments are made about the strength of circumstantial evidence, about the dangers of memory after decades. Defense attorneys frame the arrest as desperation, a narrative built on coincidence and pressure rather than fact. Prosecutors respond with methodical calm, laying out the accumulation of improbabilities that led here. Behind closed doors, detectives replay the interrogation again and again. They listen for what wasn't said. They analyze body language, shifts in tone, moments of deflection. Cold cases rarely give clean confessions. They give resistance, and resistance has its own shape. The absence of physical remains becomes the central battlefield. The defense leans into it, painting doubt in broad strokes. The prosecution counters with logic, with patterns, with the argument that not all crimes leave what people expect them to leave. It's a fragile balance, and everyone knows it. As days turn into weeks, the reality sets in. The case is no longer controlled by investigators. It belongs to the system now, to judges, to juries, to public opinion. The story that lived quietly in files and offices is exposed, vulnerable, open to reinterpretation. And yet, something has changed permanently. The cold case is no longer silent. It has a voice now, imperfect and contested, but present. The woman's name is spoken on the news, in court documents, in conversations that stretch late into the night. She is no longer just missing. She is central. For the city, the arrest is a reminder that time doesn't erase everything. That some nights leave marks that decades can't smooth over. And as the legal process grinds forward, slow and unforgiving, one truth lingers beneath every headline and every argument. The past has finally stepped forward, and whatever the outcome, it will not be ignored again. Courtrooms have their own kind of silence. It's not empty, not peaceful. It's charged, expectant, filled with the weight of what is about to be argued into existence. When the case finally reaches this stage, the cold case sheds its last layer of privacy. What was once confined to files and late-night meetings is now spoken aloud, recorded, dissected in a room where every word matters. The accused sits still, expression controlled, posture practiced. Years of distance from the event have hardened into routine, and routine is hard to crack. Across the room, the family watches with an intensity that borders on disbelief. This is the first time they have seen a person formally held to account for the absence that reshaped their lives. It feels both monumental and insufficient. Prosecutors begin carefully. They don't rush. They know the danger of overstatement, especially in a case this old. Instead, they build from the ground up, establishing the ordinary nature of the night in 2001, the unremarkable choices that preceded the disappearance. Ordinary, they argue, until it wasn't. The shift from normal to irreversible is presented not as a dramatic explosion, but as a quiet turn, the kind that leaves no witnesses and no easy explanations. Evidence is introduced slowly, methodically. Records, timelines, maps that trace movements through streets that look different now but still carry the same names. Each piece is placed with care, not to overwhelm but to accumulate. The story is not told in a single moment. It's assembled fragment by fragment, until the shape becomes hard to ignore. The defense responds with confidence. They emphasize gaps, uncertainties, the absence of what people expect to see in cases like this. No body, no direct eyewitness, no confession. They remind the court of how memory degrades, how assumptions harden into beliefs over time. They paint the investigation as a reconstruction shaped by hindsight, driven by the desire to close a painful chapter, rather than by undeniable fact. The clash is stark. Two versions of reality, both plausible on the surface, both demanding belief. This is where cold cases live or die, not in the mystery of what happened, but in the argument over what can be known. Jurors listen, scribble notes, glance between speakers, aware that they are being asked to reach back across decades and decide what truth looks like. Witnesses take the stand. Some are steady, others visibly strained. Voices tremble when dates are mentioned, when rooms are described, when phrases spoken long ago are repeated aloud. Cross-examination is relentless. Memories are tested, challenged, reframed. What once felt certain is forced to justify itself under harsh light. Experts explain science that didn't exist when the case began. They talk about probabilities, about what traces can and cannot say. The language is precise, careful, stripped of drama. It has to be. The margin for misunderstanding is thin, and the defense is ready to exploit every ambiguity. Outside the courtroom, the story evolves in parallel. Media coverage intensifies. Headlines simplify what the trial complicates. Public opinion begins to split. Some convinced the mystery has finally found its answer. Others wary of a conviction built on circumstantial ground. Online, the case is reinvestigated by strangers who speak with certainty they haven't earned. Inside, the family lives moment to moment. Each day in court opens wounds they never fully learned to close. They listen to details they imagined for years but never wanted confirmed. They watch the accused with a mixture of anger and emptiness, searching for something in his face that might explain everything, and finding nothing that satisfies. As proceedings stretch on, fatigue sets in. The pace slows. Legal arguments narrow. What once felt like a dramatic confrontation becomes procedural, technical, governed by rules that care nothing for emotion. This too is part of the reckoning. Justice moves at its own speed, indifferent to how long people have waited. When closing arguments arrive, the room feels heavier. Prosecutors speak of convergence, of how independent threads, when woven together, create strength. They remind the jury that certainty doesn't always come wrapped in simplicity. The defense counters with doubt, with the warning that the weight of history can distort perception, that filling silence with assumption is not justice. And then abruptly, it's out of everyone's hands. The jury is sent away. The courtroom empties. Days pass with no news, each one stretching nerves thinner. The city waits, some with anticipation, others with unease. A verdict will come, but no one knows which version of the past it will validate. The cold case, now exposed to the harshest scrutiny it has ever faced, hangs in suspension. Not solved, not undone. Balance between belief and doubt, between what feels true and what can be proven. And in that fragile space, the years of silence press in again, reminding everyone that even when answers are close, they are never guaranteed. The jury returns. The courtroom is quiet, tense, every movement amplified. People lean forward instinctively, as if posture alone could summon clarity from the past. The foreperson stands, paper in hand, the verdict poised to transform decades of absence into either closure or further uncertainty. No one breathes until the words begin to spill into the room, measured, deliberate, echoing against walls that have witnessed years of waiting. Every listener feels the weight of time collapsing. 20 years of questions, theories, and silent agony are distilled into a single moment. The accused shifts slightly, expression neutral, but behind the eyes, behind the carefully maintained calm, there is the subtle twitch of understanding. The past has caught up. Around the room, the family grips hands, leans into each other, afraid to feel until the sound confirms reality. Verdict read aloud, word by word. Each syllable lands like a stone thrown into still water. The cold case, once a frozen file, suddenly pulses with consequence. Shock radiates outward beyond the courtroom, reaching streets, homes, screens, the entire community. People remember the missing posters, the unanswered calls, the countless nights wondering why time had seemed to stop. Now time moves again, painfully, deliberately, propelled by a word that can't be taken back. Outside, reporters scramble. Headlines rewrite themselves in real time. Social media erupts. Cold case finally resolved, they type. Community stunned. In the quiet of offices and living rooms, families of victims from other long unsolved cases look up, hope stirring cautiously, unsure if they can trust what the headlines promise. For everyone, this verdict becomes a benchmark, A reminder that even the oldest mysteries can surface with force. Back in the courtroom, the accused is led away. Routine protocols follow, yet everything feels monumental. The arrest that began the chain reaction now meets its logical extension. Years of observation, careful documentation, painstaking reconstruction, and relentless perseverance culminate in a human moment that can't be erased. Yet even as the door closes, the truth feels incomplete, like a sentence whose punctuation remains unresolved. Detectives step out of the shadows they have inhabited for decades, feeling an exhaustion that is both relief and emptiness. This is what cold cases do. They demand persistence, patience, a willingness to carry ambiguity for years. And even in victory there is residue. Questions that never fully resolve, details too small or too late to capture. They have solved the puzzle enough to speak, but the edges remain ragged. The family processes in stages. Relief bleeds into grief. Closure entangles with memories that cannot be returned. They speak, cry, sit in silence, replay the past 20 years in their minds, comparing the reality before them with the imagined scenarios that once offered comfort or speculation. Each thought carries a thrum of shock, disbelief, and sorrow, an emotional gravity impossible to articulate fully. Meanwhile, in homes across the city, people recount the story, surprised it lasted so long, stunned it could be resolved at all. The narrative twists, bends, reshapes with each retelling. Public fascination combines with collective memory, and the cold case lives again. Not just in legal documents but in conversation, rumor, and reflection. The ordinary streets where the events began are transformed, haunted by recognition, reminder, and unspoken tension. Lawyers and investigators review the next steps. Appeals may come. Questions of procedure and admissibility will be tested. The case is alive again, legally, emotionally, socially. Each decision in the courtroom now carries amplified weight because it interacts with decades of history, memory, and unresolved anxiety. Success is partial. Triumph is tempered by reality. Yet amid all procedural rigor, the core truth remains. Decades of silence have finally been breached. The cold case, once dormant, now speaks in a way that demands attention. It leaves a community altered, a family forever marked, and a city reminded that the past is never fully gone, only waiting for the moment it will reassert itself with force. The courtroom empties, but the echoes linger. Every corner of the city seems quieter, yet charged with the invisible weight of what has just occurred. People walk the streets thinking of the woman who vanished in 2001, the investigation that stretched over decades, and the sudden violent snap of resolution that has reverberated through lives untouched for years. Cold case solved. 3 simple words that carry more shock than relief, more questions than answers. Detectives return to their offices, but their work doesn't end. Files are reorganized, evidence cross-checked, notes rewritten to account for the newly confirmed timeline. Years of detail, some long forgotten, some painstakingly preserved, now converge into a living archive that will serve for appeals, for future scrutiny, for lessons in persistence. They move with careful, mechanical precision, the adrenaline of anticipation replaced by the gravity of finality. The suspect is transferred. Custody procedures, briefings, paperwork, they all move with an almost clinical regularity. Yet behind the routine lies a subtle tension, because this person is no longer abstract, no longer a figure in a cold file. They are now the focus of legal scrutiny, of history, of public attention. Every step, every interaction is observed, measured, recorded, scrutinized. The family navigates a strange limbo. There is relief, yes, but also a hollow emptiness where anticipation once lived. Memories of 2001 resurface with unusual sharpness. Places visited, voices heard, gestures recalled with painful clarity. The resolution has arrived, yet the space it fills is complex and layered. Grief remains. Closure is not a tidy package. They move carefully, cautiously through the days, haunted by the persistence of the past, even as the present asserts itself. Media outlets churn the story. Headlines are repeated, reshaped, distilled. The narrative simplifies for consumption, often losing the nuance, but retaining the drama. Cold case solved after 2 decades becomes shorthand for years of painstaking work, the human lives caught in between, and the quiet accumulation of evidence that finally tipped the balance. Public fascination is intense, And opinion divides between admiration for the investigators and skepticism of the delayed justice. Inside the department, celebrations are muted. There is pride, yes, but also reflection. Cold cases do not yield easily. Each solved mystery carries lessons about human behavior, systemic limitations, and the fragile nature of memory. Veterans of the force discuss what worked, what failed, what might have been accelerated, but they do so quietly, because the story is now public and any words could be misinterpreted. For the city itself, the event has changed perception. Ordinary streets and intersections are now tied to extraordinary memory. People remember that 2001 wasn't just another year. It was a year when someone vanished and stayed absent until the long shadow of persistence returned. The urban fabric carries the story now, woven into collective consciousness. Legal proceedings continue. Motions are filed. Appeals are considered. Lawyers debate minutiae that the public will never see. But every small point has the potential to affect the final long-term outcome. Cold cases are never truly over. They persist as legal, emotional, and social entities long after the headlines fade. Investigators begin preparing reports, lectures, training material. They know that this case will serve as precedent, as proof that persistence, innovation, and patience can overcome time. They hope it will inspire new approaches, caution against old assumptions, and guide future generations who will face the silence of unsolved mysteries. And yet, even as resolution is documented, the human heart of the case, the disappearance, the anxiety, the decades of uncertainty, remains unerasable. The story has moved forward, but its residue lingers, touching all who were involved, all who watched, all who remember. In this way, the cold case, though technically solved, continues to live, a quiet, persistent shadow over a city that will never forget. The past has been confronted, the present has acted, and the future remains uncertain. Justice has moved, but it moves slowly, carefully, measured by the weight of years and the persistence of memory. And somewhere in the ordinary rhythm of daily life, the echoes of 2001 continue to reverberate, subtle, relentless, inescapable. Time, after all, does not heal neatly. It stretches, it frays, it layers itself over memory until even the sharpest recollections are softened by distance. Yet in this case, decades of waiting have finally been pierced. The cold case that haunted Sydney since 2001 has shifted from abstract frustration to tangible reality. An arrest, a courtroom, a verdict. All signals that the long silence has been broken. But the echoes remain stubborn, unrelenting, impossible to ignore. The suspect sits in custody, processed and catalogued, yet the public's attention magnifies each movement, each word, each gesture. Lawyers debate endlessly over phrasing, procedure, admissibility. What once seemed like minor inconsistencies now carry enormous weight. Time has changed the landscape of memory, evidence, and perception, and every step must account for the fragile balance between past and present. For the family, life has transformed yet remains tethered to loss. Relief fights with grief, closure fights with lingering emptiness. They replay the night of disappearance over and over, reconstructing in their minds what they will never see again. Every detail recovered in testimony, every trace of evidence, illuminates the past yet deepens the resonance of absence. Even in resolution, the void remains tangible. Investigators return to routines that now feel altered. The city moves outside their windows, indifferent, unaware of the decades compressed into the past few months. Streets, intersections, parks, ordinary locations now feel layered, weighted with memory and consequence. Cold cases leave marks not only on files and evidence rooms but on the world itself, subtly reshaping perception, altering how people navigate spaces once neutral. Media coverage ebbs, but fragments persist. Headlines fade into archives, tweets disappear into timelines, yet the story remains vivid in conversations, in collective memory, in the way people recount the past. The phrase Sydney 2001 cold case solved circulates endlessly, shorthand for shock, perseverance, and the relentless march of time that finally delivers action. Public fascination becomes historical record. Legal proceedings continue in quieter ways. Appeals may emerge. Challenges will be filed. Arguments about admissibility, interpretation, credibility. They all test the limits of what decades can preserve. Yet each motion reinforces a truth the city has already felt. Absence, when confronted persistently, cannot remain indefinite. Silence may dominate for years, but it is never absolute. Detectives reflect privately, reviewing timelines, noting breakthroughs, analyzing what worked, what could have been accelerated, and what never will. Cold cases are teachers in patience, in vigilance, in the way human behavior resists categorization. Their lessons endure even after the headlines fade, shaping methods, policies, and the minds of those who follow. The family begins to integrate closure into daily life, slowly, unevenly, painfully. Memories of loss remain, but so do threads of vindication, small assurances that the pursuit of justice was neither forgotten nor abandoned. Emotional relief is tempered by the knowledge that the past will always coexist with the present, that history can never be fully erased, only acknowledged. The city, now aware, carries the story quietly beneath its daily rhythm. People notice familiar intersections differently. Streets where ordinary life once masked extraordinary tragedy are never quite neutral again. The case becomes part of the collective consciousness, an unspoken reminder that mysteries can persist, but persistence eventually yields consequence. And finally, in the stillness that follows legal action, there is a kind of reverberation. The cold case, once dormant, now lives openly in memory, in law, in hearts. Its resolution is incomplete in some senses. It cannot undo what was lost, but it asserts that time is not immunity, that decades cannot erase responsibility. The shadow of 2001 remains persistent and chilling, yet now anchored to a human reckoning. Sydney has felt it, the family has endured it, the suspect has confronted it, and the investigators have chased it relentlessly. The story moves forward unbroken, carrying both the weight of the past and the echo of persistence, a final testament to the power of endurance, vigilance, and the long, inexorable march of justice. The cold case is no longer cold. It is a story told, a life acknowledged, a city reminded. And yet, in every corner where absence once ruled, its memory lingers unrelenting, inescapable, permanent. The past speaks, the present listens, and the future carries the quiet, unbroken resonance of a truth that has refused to remain hidden. Time settles strangely after a resolution. The courtroom drama recedes, the headlines fade, but the story doesn't vanish. It lingers in the spaces between daily life, the coffee shops, the office corridors, the streets where people walk unaware of the decades compressed into a single phone call or a knock at a door. For those involved, nothing truly returns to normal. The cold case has left a permanent echo, a vibration that continues to hum beneath ordinary sound. Investigators review the files again, not out of necessity but instinct. Patterns, timelines, and statements are traced with fingers hovering over yellowed printouts and digital records. Every detail is reconsidered, every decision relived, because the work of a cold case never fully ends. They know that appeals, future inquiries, and questions from journalists will probe every step, every choice, and every silent moment from 2001 to today. Even victories demand vigilance. The family begins the delicate process of reconstructing life in the wake of closure. There is relief, certainly, but it is tangled with a grief that refuses to leave. 20 years of uncertainty cannot be erased in a single verdict. They walk familiar streets and notice familiar sights differently, haunted by what was lost but tempered by the fact that someone, at last, has been held accountable. Each sunrise feels heavy with memory, yet lighter with acknowledgement. Legal proceedings continue in smaller, quieter ways. Motions and appeals move through the system, procedural gears grinding slowly but inexorably. The accused, now fully immersed in the formalities of the legal process, adjusts to life defined by boundaries, scrutiny, and surveillance. Every step, every recorded interaction, is a reminder that the past has finally caught up. Silence, after all, cannot hold indefinitely. Media coverage adapts to the new reality. Headlines simplify, social media debates flare and fade. Documentaries begin to trace the cold trail of the investigation, and the public reshapes its memory of 2001. Ordinary citizens suddenly see streets, intersections, and parks with new awareness, as if the city itself has been subtly rewritten by knowledge of the crime, the years of waiting, and the eventual confrontation. Inside investigative offices, reflection mixes with exhaustion. Cold cases demand more than skill. They demand endurance, patience, and relentless attention to detail. Detectives review procedures, retrace decisions, and record lessons that will shape future generations. Each solved mystery becomes both a triumph and a cautionary tale. A reminder that absence can endure, but persistence can ultimately reclaim the past. Emotion in the family and the city unfolds slowly. Relief grows mingled with persistent questions. Could it have been solved sooner? Could evidence have been interpreted differently? Could someone have acted differently in 2001? The answers are partial, fragmented, layered with human complexity. Yet the simple fact remains. Accountability has arrived, and the silence that defined a generation of grief has been broken. The cold case itself transforms. No longer dormant, it now exists in multiple forms. As a legal precedent, a historical record, a narrative circulating in public memory, a cautionary tale for law enforcement, and a personal journey for those touched directly. It is alive again, not in mystery but in consequence. Its voice is quieter than before but steadier, undeniable, permanent. In quiet moments, detectives, journalists, and family members alike feel the weight of decades in a single thought. Time may have been lost, opportunities may have been missed, but the arc of persistence has delivered a reckoning. The city itself seems changed, the streets slightly heavier, the ordinary light tinged with remembrance, as if the past and present coexist in a way that cannot be fully disentangled. And in the heart of the story, the truth has settled into a form that is both fragile and enduring. The disappearance is no longer abstract. It is named, documented, and confronted, yet it retains its haunting, subtle power, reminding all who encounter it that some echoes never die, some silences never fully heal, and some cold cases, though solved, continue to reverberate through time, memory, and conscience. The story is over in one sense, but in another, it has only just begun to exist in the shared consciousness of a community that refused to forget. The past speaks. The present listens. The future carries the shadow, the lesson, and the resonance of a truth that has refused to remain hidden for more than 2 decades. Even as the trial concludes and the courtroom empties, the investigation continues in subtler ways. Evidence once thought peripheral is revisited, details once overlooked are re-examined under new lenses, and digital records are probed with techniques that didn't exist 2 decades ago. Cold cases, by their nature, do not end with a verdict. They evolve, persist, and demand attention long after the headlines fade. Each fragment of information can reshape the narrative, alter legal strategy, or clarify what remained uncertain. The city itself seems transformed. Streets and neighborhoods, once ordinary, now carry memory. Residents unconsciously recount stories they half remembered. Details from 2001 resurfacing in conversations, social media threads, and casual remarks. The ordinary rhythm of life continues, but with an undercurrent of awareness. Absence, disappearance, and unresolved trauma leave invisible marks that linger longer than anyone anticipates. For the family, daily life becomes a balance between relief and lingering grief. The arrest and conviction are undeniable milestones, yet they do not erase the years spent waiting, wondering, and fearing. Small moments, passing a park, walking by a street corner, seeing a familiar face, trigger echoes of the past. Closure is not neat. It arrives in fragments, in sudden memories, in quiet recognition that life moves forward even while some wounds remain raw. Investigators, meanwhile, reflect on the case's long arc. They trace mistakes and successes, record lessons, and refine methods. Each solved cold case becomes a blueprint for persistence, vigilance, and adaptability. They understand that justice is a long game, often measured in decades, patience, and the accumulation of tiny breakthroughs. They recognize that the most crucial tools are not technology or forensic science alone, but memory, intuition, and relentless human dedication. Public fascination slowly shifts from shock to reflection. Documentaries, articles, podcasts, and conversations explore not only the crime itself, but the long silence that preceded resolution. People debate, question, and recontextualize the events of 2001, understanding how a disappearance could ripple through families, communities, and institutions for decades. The cold case becomes a shared cultural memory, a story told not just in courts or police files, but in living rooms, classrooms, and online forums. In quiet moments, the weight of unresolved questions persists. Why did it take so long? What small decisions, missteps, or coincidences delayed resolution? Could something have been done differently? These reflections are uncomfortable, persistent, and necessary. They remind everyone that even when justice is eventually served, time lost cannot be restored, and human lives continue to feel its absence. Yet the cold case also demonstrates resilience. Decades of uncertainty did not erase the possibility of truth. Persistence, methodical investigation, and relentless questioning ultimately reclaimed a story once thought lost. The arrest, conviction, and public reckoning mark not an ending, but a transformation. The silent mystery has been forced into the light, its contours defined, its consequences acknowledged, its victims remembered. The city, the family, the investigators, all carry echoes of the case. Streets, offices, homes, and memories retain traces of a disappearance that shaped them invisibly. Though the past cannot be rewritten, acknowledgement changes its meaning. Silence has been confronted, mystery has been challenged, and while grief, shock, and trauma remain, they are now interwoven with proof, accountability, and the hard-earned knowledge that justice, though delayed, is possible. Even now, decades later, the story hums beneath ordinary life. In news reports, conversations, classrooms, and police briefings, it exists as a cautionary tale and a testament to the tenacity of those who refuse to let time erase memory. The cold case, once dormant, now breathes openly, carrying lessons, warnings, and the persistent weight of truth. And so the past speaks. It does not relent. It will not be forgotten. Sydney remembers. The family remembers. The city remembers. And in that remembrance, the case achieves a form of immortality, its resonance stretching far beyond the courtroom, far beyond a single arrest, far beyond the years it remained silent. The cold case lives unbroken, indelible, and eternal. Even after decades of waiting, even after a verdict and the courtroom drama have concluded, the case continues to ripple through lives in ways no one predicted. Time does not erase memory. Streets where she once walked, or where she might have walked, carry invisible shadows. Ordinary locations acquire extraordinary significance. Every intersection, every park, every quiet corner seems to echo with absence and the relentless pursuit of answers. Investigators, though officially relieved of the daily burden, remain tethered to the case. Reports are revisited, leads once thought exhausted are checked again. Digital records are examined under evolving forensic techniques. Cold cases demand vigilance. They punish complacency. Every new detail, no matter how small, can reshape a narrative, redefine a timeline, or illuminate an overlooked connection. The story, while officially resolved, continues to evolve under careful scrutiny. The family navigates a complex landscape of emotion. Relief and grief exist side by side, inseparable and persistent. 20 years of uncertainty cannot vanish with the verdict. They replay moments from 2001, the places she might have gone, the conversations that never happened, the hope that slowly faded, while trying to reconcile that justice has finally arrived. Closure is not a single point. It is a shifting, uneven process that ebbs and flows, never entirely neat, never entirely complete. Public perception also continues to shift. Media narratives, social commentary, podcasts, and documentaries explore the story from multiple angles. People debate the delays, the decisions, the mistakes, and the successes. The cold case becomes more than an isolated crime. It becomes a mirror reflecting societal expectations, procedural gaps, and the enduring human desire for resolution. Collective memory absorbs it, reshaping it, transforming it into a cautionary tale and a story of persistence. Even as the legal system continues with appeals, motions, and procedural reviews, the essence of the story remains with those who lived it. The suspect's presence in custody, the long investigation, the painstaking assembly of evidence, all of it resonates beyond the courtroom. These events are imprinted in the consciousness of a city, in the professional memory of investigators, and in the private lives of a family who has carried grief for decades. The cold case now inhabits multiple realms simultaneously. It is a legal precedent, a historical document, a cultural memory, and a living emotional narrative. It is studied in law enforcement classrooms, discussed in living rooms, and debated in public forums. The past, once silent and unreachable, now speaks across generations, teaching lessons about vigilance, patience, and the importance of never letting memory fade. And yet, even with all the resolution, shadows remain. Small uncertainties, minor discrepancies, and unanswered questions continue to linger. No verdict can fully erase the passage of time. No evidence can fully reconstruct the lost years. No acknowledgement can fully restore what was taken. The cold case, solved as it may be, leaves traces, resonances in memory, in community, and in the way people perceive time, absence, and accountability. Still, there is a profound lesson in persistence. The decades of investigation, the meticulous accumulation of evidence, the patience of law enforcement, and the unwavering attention of the family all culminated in a form of justice long delayed but finally realized. The story proves that absence is never absolute, that silence is never permanent, and that human determination can confront even the most stubborn mysteries. The city moves on, yet it is subtly transformed. Ordinary streets, workplaces, and neighborhoods now carry invisible imprints of what transpired, as if memory has left a permanent layer on the landscape. Life continues, but awareness lingers, a quiet, persistent hum of history, grief, and the endurance of justice. The cold case is no longer frozen. It breathes in memory, in history, in law, and in the hearts of those who refuse to let it die. It is resolved, yet it is alive, reminding everyone that even after decades, truth can surface, accountability can be claimed, and the past, no matter how long silent, cannot remain invisible forever. Even after legal proceedings settle into routine, the emotional and psychological aftermath continues to echo through the lives of all involved. The family, the investigators, the city, they are bound to the memory of what happened, to the absence that stretched for decades, and to the fragile victory that has now been claimed. Time may have brought resolution, but it cannot erase the scars of waiting, wondering, or the unrelenting pressure of unanswered questions. Detectives return to their offices, but the case has left an indelible imprint. Every detail is now cataloged, cross-checked, and stored as a model for how persistence can ultimately pierce decades of silence. They review the tiniest anomalies, the overlooked pieces of evidence, and the decisions that shape the long arc of investigation. Lessons are learned not only for themselves but for future generations of law enforcement who will face mysteries just as stubborn, just as cold, just as elusive. The suspect, now firmly under the eye of the legal system, exists in a world of scrutiny and procedure. Every movement is recorded, every word considered, every interaction weighed against a backdrop of history. Yet for all the meticulous attention of the law, there is a quiet understanding. Accountability has arrived, but memory does not forgive, and the consequences of past actions ripple far beyond the courtroom. Outside, the city absorbs the story slowly. Streets, intersections, and parks become layered with unseen history. Ordinary citizens feel the presence of the past without fully knowing why. Conversations remember her absence. Stories are retold in fragments, each retelling a mixture of shock, disbelief, and recognition that the past is never as distant as it seems. Cold cases, once merely files on a shelf, imprint themselves into the very fabric of society. The family moves forward cautiously. Relief is intertwined with grief, hope with residual trauma. Every day brings new reminders of what was lost, of what could never be recovered, but also proof that their persistence, their unwillingness to forget, has yielded accountability. They navigate life as if carrying a double burden. The memory of absence and the knowledge that justice, long delayed, has finally arrived. Media coverage continues in waves, revisiting the cold case with retrospectives, documentaries, and interviews. The narrative evolves, emphasizing resilience, persistence, and the relentless passage of time that ultimately brought the mystery into light. Public fascination persists, not just with the crime itself, but with the arc of human determination, the painstaking attention to detail, and the way decades of silence were finally broken. Even with the case officially solved, there is a quiet persistence in the shadows. Unanswered questions linger, minor inconsistencies remain, and the texture of human memory resists finality. The cold case, though technically closed, continues to breathe in lives, in streets, in conversations, and in the shared consciousness of a city forever changed by her absence and the extraordinary effort to reclaim the truth. Lessons endure. Persistence, patience, and methodical inquiry are celebrated alongside the sobering reminder of how long injustice can persist. The story now exists in multiple dimensions. As a legal precedent, a historical account, a cautionary tale, and an emotional narrative etched into the hearts of those who refuse to let silence define them. The city moves forward, but it carries memory invisibly. Ordinary life unfolds, but beneath it lies the quiet imprint of a story decades in the making. Streets, offices, and homes are subtly altered by history, awareness, and reflection. Life continues, but it is tempered by remembrance, by acknowledgement, by the enduring presence of a cold case that refused to remain hidden. The past has spoken, the present listens, and the future carries the weight, the lessons, and the resonance of a truth that has refused to be forgotten. A cold case that, though solved, will continue to reverberate through memory, through law, and through the shared consciousness of a community that will never fully let it go. Even as days become weeks, and weeks stretch into months, the story of 2001 continues to ripple quietly through the city. Streets that once seemed ordinary now carry invisible weight. Intersections, parks, and quiet lanes feel heavier, charged with memory and consequence. The cold case, though officially solved, has left its mark on the fabric of everyday life, lingering like a shadow that moves with the rhythm of routine. Investigators reflect constantly on the long arc of the case. They revisit timelines, reconsider evidence, and discuss what breakthroughs emerged from patience and methodical persistence. Cold cases teach more than law enforcement techniques. They teach about human behavior, about memory, about the persistence of absence and the pressure it exerts on everyone it touches. Every solved case becomes a reminder that truth can be delayed, but it is rarely denied. The family lives in a world transformed by accountability. Relief is tempered by grief. Closure coexists with memory. They replay fragments of 2001 daily. Missed conversations, unrealized plans, the faint possibility of what could have been. Yet the arrest, the courtroom proceedings, and the verdict are tangible proof that someone finally has been held responsible. It is a fragile balm for wounds that never fully closed, a partial exhale after decades of tension. Outside, the city watches in quiet reflection. Media coverage diminishes, but the story does not disappear. Conversations in homes, offices, and social circles carry remnants of shock, awe, and respect for the persistence that brought resolution. Cold cases exist not only in files or courtrooms, they persist in memory, in community awareness, in the subtle reshaping of how people perceive safety, absence, and justice. The suspect exists now fully within the legal and procedural framework of accountability. Every movement, every word, every interaction is scrutinized and recorded. The weight of decades presses in alongside the formal mechanisms of law. Routine now becomes extraordinary under the persistent gaze of memory and consequence. History has caught up, and there is no return. Lessons from the case extend beyond the immediate circle. Law enforcement, prosecutors, and investigators study the methods, the patience, and the breakthroughs that ultimately led to resolution. Cold cases, long dormant, require innovation, dogged attention, and an understanding that silence does not equal absence. It is a challenge to be met. Each detail recovered, every connection made, is a triumph of persistence over time. The emotional aftermath for the family continues to evolve. Relief shifts into reflection. Grief shifts into remembrance. The desire to forget competes with the obligation to remember. Everyday life is now intertwined with decades-old memories, and closure, while real, is imperfect. It is a process, a slow navigation between past trauma and present resolution, between absence and acknowledgement. The city itself seems changed. Ordinary places carry extraordinary memory, unnoticed yet persistent. People navigate spaces differently, aware at some level that history is layered beneath everyday sights and sounds. The cold case becomes part of collective consciousness, a reminder that time does not erase consequence, that absence leaves a trace, and that human determination can reclaim what was once lost. Even after formal resolution, subtle echoes persist. Minor unanswered questions remain, inconsistencies linger, and the past's influence on the present continues to hum softly in memory. The cold case, though solved, remains alive, not as a mystery, but as a cautionary tale, a historical imprint, and a testament to endurance, accountability, and vigilance. And so, decades later, the past speaks. It cannot be ignored. The present listens attentively. The future carries lessons, caution, and the subtle resonance of a truth that refused to remain hidden. The cold case lives not in suspense but in memory, in history, and in the quiet, unbroken acknowledgement of a city, a family, and a justice system that refused to let decades of silence go unanswered.